Chatoyance. But what chatoyance do? Well, it shimmeriness. Merriam-Webster says chatoyance is a changeable, undulating, narrow band of luster. The term comes from a French word meaning to shine like cat's eyes. Jewelers and gemologists use it to describe gemstones, and on flat surfaces, chatoyance can give the appearance of depth, such as in woodworking on, for example, highly polished quilted maple. And of course, we can summon this lustrous effect in pattern-welded Damascus if we're careful. Check out these awesome knives from skilled bladesmith Carl Anderson, which do a great job of demonstrating chatoyance in a still picture. Today we're going to see if we can make an especially chatoyant Damascus knife with these alternating layers of 15N20 and 1084 steel. I'm not a Damascus expert, but to me chatoyance in Damascus requires a couple things. Here's my theory. Number one, we need highly contrasting light and dark areas or lines. We've got this nailed down. Our 15N20 will stay bright when etched in ferric chloride, and our layers of 1084 will darken significantly. Number two, we need pattern contrast. Our light and dark areas of steel should have areas with low layer count interrupted by areas with high layer count. The greater the difference in layer count between the low and high layer count areas, the better. Or something like that. So we're going to be shooting for a 400 layer Damascus billet. Number three, we want a high degree of polish. The bright portion of our pattern, the layers of 15 and 20, must reflect a lot of light. So if we can execute on these three fronts, I think we'll get some really nice shimmery depth. So we've got our layer count up. Now, with a high enough layer count, chatoyance can be generated even on simple random pattern Damascus. But I'm thinking about something else here. So I've been contemplating what to do with this. I thought about raindrop, but I don't really like raindrop that much. I thought about mosaic, but I have to get some more material together and add it to this, and I'm not sure this is the greatest starting point for mosaic at any rate. And then I thought, well, what if I do twist? I do a really tight twist, and I do shallow grinding, and so I have mostly this type of stuff going across the blade, right? And then I come back, and I do ladder going the other way, and wouldn't that develop like some nice chatoyance, all that opposing sort of flow, the opposing patterns, if you do that correctly, could really develop a nice chatoyance as you look across it, or it could be really busy and ugly, I don't know. And then I decided, well, what if I do double ladder? Like, what if I have a thick bar to start like this, and I do ladder going this way, a little bit spread out, and I press it, mostly press it out, so it's, you know, I notch it out, and then I press it so it's mostly flat, and then I come back and I do ladder going the other way, and then I fully press everything out, and I will have a slightly wider pattern going this way with ladder, and then a tighter pattern going this way. And maybe that would look cool. I don't know. I'm gonna try it. Here are the lines we have to mill first time around. Looks simple, but for me, this is pretty ambitious. As they say, there's trouble at the mill. Primarily because of this ding-dong vise. It's from my drill press, and if you want to find out how bad a vise is, you just have to put it under a mill. My regular mill vise is great for taking on parallel guard slots, but it doesn't rotate, which is what I need to mill at angles. Well, why don't you just rotate the whole vise and clamp it to the mill table at an angle? It has these feet that keep it slotted on the mill table, and I try to remove the feet so I can clamp it at an angle, but it was stripping the screws, so I just went to my drill press, which was nightmarish. Wiggly doesn't really even come close to describing the issues I had with this thing. So basically, the billet will suffer. Depths are different side to side, the billet's wiggling loose while under the mill, all kinds of issues. Let me speak of gnashing of teeth. Our first set of grooves is in place, so we'll just get this flattened and pretend that none of that just happened, even though we have to do it again. All right, so I ground everything flat, and I had to grind off more than I wanted to because there's inclusions or cold shuts along the sides. You know, I sort of rounded out the bottom with the ball nose mill, but I didn't, the sides are still like this, so at the tops they're still square, and some of those pressed down and made some cold shuts. So I should have rounded those off. I just didn't take the time. I paid for it by having to grind off extra material, and I still have some along the sides, this area that's not very usable. Again, that vise was awful, so I dug pretty deep on one pass over here. I've had to file out a cold shut there, and it's still, you know, it'll make it into the final press. I think I'm going to lose probably the top part of this billet. But that's it. So I don't think we'll have anything that's 3/16 after all is said and done. It's probably going to be closer to 5/32 or 1/8 or something. So maybe these will be hunting knives. I don't know, or a kitchen knife. We'll see what happens. Let me point out something. If I were clever, right now, with the first ladder being flat, with the exception of this right here, when I mill in these other slots, they're going to appear to be on top of the current pattern. Were I clever, I would have milled every other slot this way deeper, or as deep as these were going to be, and then they'd weave sort of in and out. And where I'm really clever, you could do the same and mill these every other different heights, and then everything would be basket woven. I don't have the skill or the patience, but someone should take that on. All right, our second set of grooves have been milled in place. I won't show you that process. You can see from the results it was challenging. We'll get this thing pressed flat, see exactly how much thickness we have left, and make some decisions about what knife or knives we can make. I drew up a kitchen knife and a little puko. Let's do this. Looking pretty good until it doesn't. I don't really know what I can do to salvage this. This is probably a goner. I think I'm going to polish it up and look at the
pattern anyway. So I was milling these slots here, and I should have done that before I hardened it, basically.
At this time, when I temper a knife, I temper it in stages. So I'll do one low temperature temper cycle, check the HRC with understanding that it's going to be too hard. And then I slowly dial up more cycles and heat until I get the HRC down to where I want it. And I'd done one cycle on this, went to bed, got up the next morning. I was focused on getting it under the mill and getting the shoulders milled in. And I totally forgot that I hadn't finished tempering it and I hadn't drawn down the tang like I was going to. And so just a big careless mistake that cost me big time. All right, shake it off, Steve. So remember, we needed a high degree of polish, a lot of light reflectivity. So I sanded this to 1,000 grit before etching, etched for 15 minutes in 3-to-1, water to ferric chloride, then sanded it at 3,000 grit, etched another 15 minutes, then sanded it at 7,000 grit. And I think that's produced a pretty high polish that I'm happy with.
I've really been wrestling with what to do here. Should I put a pin in this thing, then make some sort of folder with a frame lock or something like that, or can I fixate a handle to it with some pins here and a sort of a spine that comes up here and put some copper rivets and make some steampunk looking thing? I don't know if I could really do that or not, man. It seems like something you have to undertake before heat treatment and finishing and all that. Or do I just need to cut this short, cut right about there and then make a new tang and do my best? It's pretty narrow right there. It's awful.
I've decided to shorten the blade and grind in a new tang. We're going to make an herb chopper. You guys know I really like Starbond CA glue for handle finishes, especially kitchen knives. It does a great job sealing them up. Plus the glue comes with fantastic applicator tips and a really well thought out cap. So check the description for a link to this stuff. It helps the channel if you're interested. There will also be a link to a full video on me using it. This is 4 coats that took about a minute to apply. I'll sand it smooth with 600 grit, then 1,000 grit, then buff it. It's hard to capture chatoyance on camera, but eventually I figure out the lighting in my parents' kitchen does a pretty good job. This looks metaphysically gangster. The layer count is actually a bit high in my opinion. Where at a little lower and the milling more precise, I think this double ladder would be just superior. What about our little Puko friend? Let's get it etched up and handled. Guards for both these knives are hammered brass. Double ladder with some wicked chatoyance. I'm going to be revisiting this again in the future. I learned a lot, and thanks for coming along. The herb chopper in this video is being auctioned 100% to charity, so check the links below for that, and I'll see you guys next time.
Hey, I'm working here.